Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group, the number one group for all things contingent workforce and gig economy. I've got a really interesting topic today that is going to rattle some cages, I think, because there's a lot of people that love to talk about innovation in our space. And so the topic is your contingent workforce program tech stack sucks. And we all know it, but we haven't changed it often in 10, 15, 20 years. And so I've got a really awesome person that probably needs no introduction to talk about this topic, who has an incredible background in our space as a TA leader at one of the more innovative programs that we all know about in the past, Siemens, with the allied health arena and the health area. There was a direct sourcing program, and we'll probably get into it in the conversation, to then enabling plethora of MSP and VMS enabled programs, to really jumping in on the direct sourcing program models and implementing one of the most innovative programs that we've ever seen at Siemens, and then working in the direct sourcing space for the last few years. So, Paul Peterson, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and the show today and talking about this, right? And you've been right in the weeds for considerable amount of time. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because you've seen it and you're probably the first person to say, yeah, nothing's really changed, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem that we have in
Yep.
our industry. So thank you for coming on the show to talk about the tech stack, because one of the more important things around this is a tech stack that is janky, missing pieces, etc., kills the user experience,
It
right?
does.
Both
It does.
from a candidate perspective and from a user perspective, like kills adoption from a manager perspective, and even operationally, just makes things a nightmare.
Yep.
So let's get into this, right?
Yeah.
We kind
Sure.
of talked about why this topic is important, right? With that kind of user experience analogy. But I want to hear your perspective in, being both on the buyer and the operational side to then being on the vendor side in the direct sourcing realm too. The challenges and the things. Why is this so important that we fix this?
Yeah. Well, one, Jeff, thanks for having me. I'm humbled to be able to be here, and I've been always wanted to be a part of this gig, so I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, it's near and dear to my heart, not only because I've sat in the HR tech space for almost the last decade, right? But I've also experienced it over the last 9 months as I'm walking through trying to get a job, right? And it's wow, it's really crazy. And I guess I look at it from a couple of things. One, if there's anything I look at, I always bring logic and common sense to how things are supposed to run, right? And I would say, yes, these tech stacks are really challenging sometimes, and it's not because there's a ill intent or not a great strategy. They all make sense, right? But what really happens is they fail or they suck, as we call it, right? Because people just don't use them, right?
Yeah.
And there's just a plethora of reasons, and then that's what I really want to kind of talk my way through. If I boil it down, it's um, really looking at it from this perspective of a hiring manager and a talent. Those are the two personas that if we don't focus on those, everything starts to kind of come apart at the seams. So this is going to be really, really exciting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've built a lot of these technologies from the operational perspective and managing a program and control, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Originally, and when you think about how the timing, it was 2000 and 2008 to kind of 2011 when adoption of these VMSs and MSP programs was to centralize everything, control it, and squeeze, right? Squeeze
Yeah.
it for
Hmm.
cost for especially when that time frame was, it was about controlling cost. And so, yeah, I really wasn't thinking about the users and the talent that's going to be the process that you get the best talent into your organization and the system that you're going to have to get your managers to use to procure people into your organization.
Yep.
And, you know, we've talked about adoption on the manager side and then experience on the other side, the candidate side. And the best talent has lots of opportunities typically. And if you make the experience hard, they ain't gonna press click on your and
They're
submit their
not.
resume, right?
They're just not, Jeff. And I think that's really important for us, right? There's a couple of things to think about. Like today, there's still a war for talent, for skills, right? For evidence-based information about a talent, right? So these things are still there. So tools are still trying to draw that out. But if a tool's not helping a talent naturally get to the next step in the process. It could be on that screen or the next step tomorrow or whatever the case is. They're going to drop. They're going to stop and they're going to go look for another way in. How many people? I don't even want to ask because everybody's going to go, oh, not me, but yes, they are. How many people have said, I see a job in LinkedIn, and if I know if I click apply, I'm wasting my time and energy. But I know if I go find the hiring manager, that's time better well spent. That's a broken experience. Can't
Mhm.
happen, right? So it has to be there. It has to be no black holes for the talent, has to be clear, quick communication, has to make sense. It just does. And
Yeah.
then you flip that on the hiring manager head. I'm telling you, if you don't have an easy button for them to be compliant, they're going to figure it out. They are held, they have to get stuff done, right? They have a task to accomplish. And if they have to use a system to do that, if it doesn't do it quickly for them, they'll find a way. Come on,
Well, and evidence of that is the growth in SOW, right?
100%.
SOW is growing not because it's more efficient way to get work done.
Yeah.
It's an efficient way to get work done versus through a program that has broken systems, policies, things like that. And you've seen that happen and cost to it as well. So,
Yep.
you've seen this growth in SOW now and the shrinkage in programs. And so it's been very interesting to watch. And I think the tech stack and the user experience is a big part of that. Some of it is policy driven. Um, and so, the control is important, yes, especially when it comes to compliance, not only with program policies and issues, but also with regulatory compliance. And
Yep.
so the systems are supposed to bring you through that easily so that you're in compliance with both internal and regulatory policy, but the time it takes and the experience needs to be super simple, or they're just going to avoid it all at all costs, and
Yep.
then you've just blew everything up.
Well, and I think that's a really important thought to really start to get down this pathway, right? Because there's two sides to this equation. There's a side of stay status quo and keep struggling with the hiring managers to engage the tool, to engage all those elements, right? Really cool tech stacks have excellent compliance elements, whether it's from a purchasing perspective, policy, compliance and governance. Those types of things are all built in. There are some beautiful onboarding tools that are out there today. There's some really great data sets that are available inside these VMS products and all of that. But I'm going to tell you, if it's too hard to put it all in there, it's not going to get in there. And then that's a snowball. And it's created what we have today. You have all of this crazy rogue wild, wild west SOW spend, right? Now, some people have found ways to gain governance over it, but most of it's through a very logical approach, staring at two personas, that talent and the hiring manager. Make it
Yep.
so the talent can be exposed to the opportunities. They can bring their profiles forward, and those profiles create opportunities for them to meet with a hiring manager or meet with the SOW or guy that needs the work done, right? Let all that come to life. And when the hiring manager finds the right resource, I hate to say it, but let the button just be clicked, right?
Yeah.
And then compliance happens, everybody starts on time, and it just works.
Yeah, and I know there's a little bit of an oversimplification in the just make it work and click,
For
but
sure.
and the managers appreciate that. They understand there's going to be a need for compliance and they all want to do the right things. But once it gets clunky and the system doesn't work or you put information in this system and then somebody asks you to put the same information in this system and oh by the way you also have to fill out this Google Drive or this spreadsheet for me, they go, I got to just do my job. I don't want to do with this, so I'm going to go to legal, get a contract signed, and then be done with it. But in doing
It,
that, they're putting the company at risk and they're probably paying more than they should. So, but they know that because they just got to get the job done, right?
right, right. And I think I did oversimplify, the easy button on that, but the real simple concept is like make the workflow for the hiring manager make sense,
Yeah.
right? I'll put it in once, but I don't want to put it in twice. And I don't want to have such intricate data that, oh my gosh, I'm going to start skipping boxes because, I only want to get the basics in, right? So
Yeah.
there's a whole logic that fits in that space that what is the statement that I was thinking of? It's like a system, the complexity doesn't necessarily mean that it's sophisticated. It just means it's complex, right? And I think that's something for us to really think about is can we simplify this in a way that does increase adoption, which then impacts everything else?
Yeah. And I think taking complexity and making it simple is the words we want, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And that's the beauty of a well-designed system and a tech stack. You know, one of the things that is a challenge, though, of course, is a lot of these systems were built in the early 2000s, right? And they've been integrated into your ERPs. A lot of integrations on enterprise systems are tough. So they aren't going anywhere, right?
Right.
In general, I don't want to say they aren't. Some folks are pulling out, but for the most part, that's a big effort to move. And so then you see a layer on a layer on a layer of
Mhm.
systems. And what are you like? I see that as a challenge, but then there's the opportunity of making it work. And I think, if in your background, if we were to look at the Siemens program, you had a VMS and then you brought in a direct sourcing tool that was let's call it a layer, but you made it seamlessly work within the program, right? So,
Yep.
like, what are some best practices you're seeing? Talk more about the challenges that you've seen, like,
Yep.
because it's not just the Siemens program. You've seen many other programs that have these layers and the legacy system with layers concept. Um, are there other challenges when you're building out a tech stack that you got to worry about, and then challenges to change to get more innovative, right? So,
Yep.
what are the challenges? Plus, then let's talk about some best practices.
Yeah, so there's always challenge to change, right? And the biggest thing that you keep finding is that it's typically it's a fragmented element of ownership, right? You've got, you as the TA guy own the outcome, right? So you're like, hey, if this thing runs the right way, it's going to be sweet. But all of a sudden now I have to deal with procurement, right? And some of the things that I had to be able to, no offense to any procurement people out
Yeah,
there, but what I had to navigate was you're like, wow. And some of the suppliers that were in my program know like what wow meant. There was an audit that was insanity, right? But that came from a procurement and compliance element of the supply product, right? So that made it difficult and complicated. Then I had an IT element. They're like, hey, no way. You're not bringing this into our system. So we had to let it stand alone all by itself. And then we had a whole buying strategy from the background, carrying, we'll just say we're carrying cost weight with us that
yeah,
we didn't necessarily need to carry with us, but it was all part of the process. So, the best practice or not, what worked is I just kind of took a Nike theory, right? Just do it
yeah,
and go from there.
yeah,
So I took some of the legacy stuff and I built some really cool stuff. Will Hire did a beautiful job of I swear to you, Praneeth, every Friday I would give him, this is what I need you to do, Praneeth, and he would just code it. And Monday it was alive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Praneeth. Appreciate you, man. Those are the things that are there. So it's, working with your tech stack to be able to say, hey, these are the legacy elements that I'm dealing with. Help me make sense of what I need to have happen. How do I make sense of the experience of the talent, right? Make the application process make sense to the talent. How do I make it so my hiring manager has the right feedback? I got hiring managers, I was hit in the face from a couple of the hiring managers says, Paul, why can't we use our logo to find talent? Right. So not necessarily a tech stack thing out of the gate, but then making all that come to life was complicated, right? So
Yeah.
those are the things that we look at. And the best practices today, the only way I sit here and evaluate this is I think about a couple of things. One, best practice, thinking about it from an adoption perspective. To me, adoption, we have positive adoption by the hiring manager and by the talent. If that's a positive adoption, everything else will work its way through,
Yeah.
right? If I got hiring managers that are in the system that are using it and using it the way it's designed to be used, awesome. If I have talent that are making a way through the end and I don't get dropouts, right? Your analytics, everybody's probably watched that. You get a dropout at this point, you're like, oh, I got it, and then I can fix those things, right? So that I think is there. And then the other things are it's like take a logical, simplistic approach to get done what needs to get done. And there's a lot of statement out there like configuration and flexibility and all that. Stay to the core, man. Stay to the
Yeah.
core. If the tech, what does that tech do best? Can it onboard? Can it source? Can it vet? What can it do? But what it does best is what you want it to do for you.
Yeah.
And have that conversation and validate what's best with evidence. I mean, that sounds like Captain Logic, but it's there, right? You just get the evidence. So,
Yeah, 100%. And I think systems get too complicated because they become designed for everyone.
mhm.
And then all of the features that are designed for the 10 different programs, if you put them on the one program, they really only needed half of those features. But they get, because there was two other features added on this program, that program, the next implementation has all the features. And then you got to figure out, do I need all these features or should I turn most
Right.
of them off? So getting back to the core, I think functionality and turning as much off as possible
Yep.
will help with that adoption
I
scenario.
agree. I also think that, I've made some of these notes in my head over time, right? But again, if you think about it from a tech stack perspective, when we think about a technology launch, don't stop thinking about you're implementing a technology launch, right? You're implementing a behavior change.
Yes.
It's a behavior change that starts with how is the user, the human being, because that's where it begins. How are they going to engage? And if vendors pay attention, right? So if you're thinking of the user experience as you're building your tool, work backwards from there, right? What's the simple way to make sure that this is something they'll use, right? And hiring managers, talent, recruiters, suppliers, and have it so when you turn all those things off, there are things that you can turn back on if needed. If you decide that you want to move into a direct sourcing arena, then get that switch to be able to turn on and have it make sense, right? If you decide you're going to use an onboarding, a digital onboarding strategy that is, has credentialing elements and all that, turn those things on as you need them. But don't short suit your tech, just make sure that it's simplistic enough. Yeah.
So one of the things too is that you'd started to see a few years back, and then it seems like change of direction, at least with some of the big VMSs, with now them going into the EOR game, I guess. Um, but they were talking about being the system of record, knowing that they were a legacy product,
Mhm.
and then really opening up for integration for the newer technologies that can provide innovations. Have you seen that continue, or are like it seems like that has not taken as much, you know, momentum as it was a couple years back, where they were saying, "Hey, listen, we're opening up to the innovative products,"
Yeah.
um, and that strategy, and then it's kind of gone. It seems, at least in marketing and where the market is going, it's going back to silver bullet. We're going to try to be more insular and just control more of the market. And then instead of adding innovation and new features, functionality to help and make it a seamless environment for users, you're going to have to replace the legacy system with the new innovative one. And so then they win because nobody wants that change, right? Or at least you have to put your neck out if you're going to remove the ERP, the legacy ERP out of a company, right? What are you seeing to try to improve with the innovative prod processes, like to make it seamless? Are you seeing improvements in integration? I know, and we can talk about AI and all this other stuff and agents to help with integrations, but that's futuristic, right?
Right.
Today, what are the legacy systems doing to allow for innovation? Or have they lost their way and become EORs?
I don't know if they've lost their way necessarily, but if you look at again the functionality of what the legacy systems need to have, right? They are a repository
Yeah.
and they enable a process and they document data and information, their compliance elements and all of that. I think, yes, there was a lot of thought process just a couple of years ago, right? It's like, hey, we could build let's remove, God help me if I say this, but let's remove the MSP, let's remove and make this its own product and integrate an EOR with the VMS and put a direct sourcing strategy and all of those things added a lot of noise to the industry.
Hmm.
And I think that people have kind of drawn the line at the noise and said, I got to get back to making sure that I'm taking care of business, right? This whole SOW thing, I don't want to use the word epidemic, but because it's got a thing to it, right? It's if it's not brought into governance, it could crush programs.
Yes.
And it's not the governance doesn't need to be constrictive. It just needs to be something that is there. So I think that the focus of MSPs, VMSs, and the other tech stack is how do I operationalize some of these things that are out in the industry today that are so key? Come on, what did SIA call out? 3 trillion or so in SOW spend that's running around the world today that is not governed.
Yep.
That's a lot of greenfield for any organization to try to take a bite of. So rather than trying to cut against it, get into it and find the ways to make it
But
easier to use.
stepping in front of the procurement of SOW doesn't bring it into the program,
No, it doesn't.
because
I
most MSPs and staffing people are not procurement SOW procurement experts.
right, right. And there's a space though, because if we go into this logic of the personas that are involved in this, right? If you go to the hiring manager and you make this a compliant element, if your focus as a third party entity trying to penetrate this organization, get to the people that make sense that are doing it every day. And if you can amplify that, right? So you get one hiring manager, two, 10, 50, 100, all of a sudden, you're going to start seeing compliance happen more and more and more because you'll have experiences that were positive, that worked. And then you're going to have VMS is going to jump on board. Oh, golly, look at that. There's compliance. Now I got spend coming into my program. They're going to double down on lifting that across
Yeah.
all of the borders. And all of a sudden, you've got not all of a sudden, a lot of times it takes time, but you'll get what you want in the industry, and that's your growth through compliance.
Like it's with anything innovative, and we can talk about SOW, probably the best solutions tend to be the agile ones that have been developed as point solutions for managing that better.
Mhm.
That doesn't make them a VMS though.
No.
They're a point solution that if the VMS and the program wants them in, like the MSPs and the program managers want that SOW spend in, that's utilizing this tool, don't just put some lipstick on the legacy VMS with a SOW. Say you have a SOW module now,
Right.
integrate with the best of breed package, and then figure out the pricing and support model that makes it palatable for them to bring it through the program.
Right. Well, it goes right back to let's let the tech that does its best in its category do what it does. And that will lend to how the cost structure then is built around that. Because if you get efficiencies and economies of scale because the tech does what it's supposed to do, adoption goes quickly. You don't have a lot of rework and iteration because it's been built for that. And again, you'll see these things come through. A little tolerance out of the gate will build a lot of spend in the future.
Yeah, and on something like that, though, do you not see conflicts of interest where the VMS says, "Well, we got our own SOW module, right?" And then even direct sourcing between an MSP dragging their feet because most of the big MSPs are staffing agencies
Mhm.
that want full margin recruitment revenue, not payroll revenue, and they drag their feet on direct sourcing programs. Typically, the large MSPs have some do it well, but a lot have dragged their feet and on purpose. And then that's why it's opened the door to third parties coming in to do direct sourcing and
Mhm.
third party direct sourcing technologies. So you know, how, as a buyer, how did you overcome that with some of the obstacles around bringing in the most innovative technology when you've got a legacy technology or the managers of the technology, be it an MSP, that are really
Yeah.
not interested in bringing in a third party to, you know,
Yeah.
integrate in?
All right. So I'll go to there a little bit, right? So we had a really simplistic brain, right? Is that when we want to introduce this innovation, that we had three core things we looked at: better, cheaper, faster. Everybody's already heard that, right? But taking those things and breaking them down, what's better, right? My experience with my hiring manager, my talent has to get better. And then we define what that has to look like, right? It needs to be faster. Okay, I need to get from the point of insertion of a requirement, moving all the way down to the scale of when does that individual become productive, right? So the time to fill and all that, those are all important, but I moved it down the lane even farther of when do they become productive? When did they produce revenue? When did they produce a solution? So those are the things that are there. So faster, obviously, that was incorporated into that, and those all hit core elements inside of the organization. Like, oh, if I can put a body in place in a quicker way, in a better way, it's there. Cheaper. I hate using that word cheaper, but it goes so well with better, cheaper, faster, right? But it's looking at it from the perspective of have I maximized the value of this program, right? Have I brought forward a product that makes sense? And there's this natural tension, Jeff, that's in the industry, and it's been here for decades, right? At least the last couple of decades. And it's like, how do I reduce the cost? Now, it came unnaturally for a while, but supply bases have kind of drawn a line saying it can no longer come from me. So now it has to come through process and efficiencies. And that natural weight right there is what's allowing innovation to be penetrating some of these legacy products and systems because the need is there. And we know today too, we can have a better experience, right? It can be faster and there is a more efficient way to do it. And I think those that are stepping into that are seeing the fruits of that now.
Yeah, and having a very simple but strong North Star, guiding light, whatever you want, to bring
Yep.
it back to those that as you're evaluating products and services, and then how to bring that behavior change, like you say, it's about behavior. You, you're enabling that with efficiencies in the technology stack.
Right.
Um, Having that guiding light or North Star simple criteria, but you're always bringing it back to that, right? Because you can
Yeah.
get caught up in the hype and go after it, chase innovation that isn't. better, faster, cheaper. It's adding a layer. It's not integrating well. And so it actually makes it slower and it's more expensive because you've got the layers, right? And
Exactly.
so, like, I think that's an amazing way to look at it, whatever your North Star is, but that's a simple three North Star, and you can define them different ways. But that's a great way to always be checking what you're doing back to those North Stars, right?
Yeah. We even, when we had, like when I was moving this into more of a solutions based facing the industry instead of just a logo, right? We took that better, cheaper, faster, and we said, now organize those for me one to three. Which one's most important? Amazing when you put those three simplistic things in front of the C-suite that says, well, I need it to be one, two, three. Then your solution starts to become more natural, simplistic, and it's there. And then as you look at that, it's like, okay, what does my tech need to do? What are the, if I look at my RFP today and I took those three elements in the order that they said, is that RFP? Does that vendor actually showing me that that makes sense? And then are they producing evidence to those things as I shortlist them and look to engage them? So
Yeah.
I, I love simple North Stars. And, we didn't recreate that. That's not rocket science. The industry has been screaming that for a long time.
So, I'm trying to think through some of the more questions to ask because this is such a great topic and it's gone from tech stack to enabling behavior change. I think if we were to take
Yeah.
a headline and, you know, there's things to avoid, I think, as well, because changing behavior is based on gaining trust of why are we changing, right?
Yep.
Some of it is you can sell the new shiny objects and move things forward with your North Star. But what were some of the things you should avoid in making sure that you're you're following that North Star and you're gaining the
Yeah.
trust of the C-suite?
I'm trying to come down with that too, because I know we're a little bit off script here, but if we look at it from that perspective of, what to avoid, I did a few things and I'm trying to bolt it onto like the last 8 years, right? And in Siemens, the things that I avoided was like, for instance, this audit. I avoided conflicting with the audit department. Why? Because it was a minor. It wasn't a major, right? It was like, if I have to do an audit, fine, I'll do an audit. And if that's what they require, it actually added to the validity of what a vendor was bringing to me, right? It was beautiful. It was great. I mean, I hated it at the moment that I had to think about it, but then I'm like, no. By the time I got to the end of the due diligence, those suppliers were premium, right? Really did a beautiful job, right? And we knew that they would do a really good job. Fighting against your internal protocols. Pick your battle, right? Pick the battle of, say, why can't a person that applies for an FTE role be an applicant for a contract role? I picked that battle and won. Why? Because I put logic to in place, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
there isn't any reason that if Bob Jones applied for an FTE role, why he can't apply with this other entity over here.
Yeah,
And we
of
can,
course, there's
oh,
some myths around the compliance issues, but they are myths when you really start to dig in. And quite
right.
honest, from the user experience, if I'm a candidate, there's probably 70% chance that I would take and I'm looking for a role and I want to work for your organization, I'll take a contract to get my foot in the door.
In a minute. And that's these silver and bronze medalists are a beautiful grounds for us to look at. I mean, uh, we use our ATS all the time to go pick on that stuff, right? But these are some of the things that are there, right? Looking at it from a risk perspective, the don'ts on the risk perspective, don't push against them. Why?
Yeah.
Right? Absorb the fact that these are risks to their concerns and deal with them and
Yeah.
make sure that you've eradicated the risk so you're going to get compliance and adoption internally. If I have a hiring manager that is, the risk gets in their ear and that happens overnight, right? A risk can make one statement and says, hey, if you do this, it's on you, Joe. Joe's not going to do it ever. He's like,
Yeah.
nope,
Yeah,
I'll follow
exactly.
whatever I know doesn't get me in trouble, right? I think
Um,
those are the big deals. Yeah.
yeah, no, I think you're hitting on some things that are lived experiences, and they're nuggets of gold for the next person that's looking to make change happen. And I don't think it's just around the tech stack. I think it's in anything in the programs or anything within a corporate environment in general. Those are great tidbits because, you know, you could have the best product, the best processes, but if it's not getting adopted because of some of the change of behavioral or some corporate obstacles, you're not going to get it in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know we didn't talk about this in our prep, but where are you seeing things going in the tech stack environment? Are we going back to the, jack of all trades, silver bullet type technologies because, newer technologies are coming in that manage all aspects of things? Or are we still in this, you must look at seamless integrations with the legacy systems that have deep integrations? Like, where are we seeing things going?
Yeah.
Because everybody loves to talk about innovation, but when it really comes down to it, not a lot of people do. And we're still dealing with technology that, although, yes, maybe they've upgraded a little bit,
Mhm.
for the most part, was developed in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, about 2008. Yeah, right. That's a lot of it. When a lot of the most premium things. Well, I think, integration doesn't create experience, right? It's not something that if you've have tried integrations and they've proven out that they run and they work, it doesn't necessarily create the experience that we're looking for. You got to remember what your audience is, right? The expectation of a talent today, especially those talent that are coming through, us guys that have been in the industry, we are tolerant to a lot of this stuff because we don't get all of the facets sometimes. But in today's workforce, those people that are highly sought after have an expectation, and that tool needs to run really, really well, right? They
Yeah.
have to have a positive experience with that. And again, I think it's continuing to look at that from that perspective. And looking at platform, I'm trying to get to the answer to your question, but looking at a platform today, I think we all have to have a very open thought process here to be able to say, is it solving for X, right? Does it solve the problem? If it does, give it a whirl, right? I have had countless hypotheses that have proven out and that have failed. But we put a hypothesis together, we test it, we push on it, we fail fast and forward, or it worked, right?
Yeah.
I'm on my very first, execution of hiring strategies or what I actually pushed out in social were all experiments.
Yeah.
And again, another shout out to Praneeth on that. He said, Paul, just try it. I'm like, all right. And we tried it. So I think, I don't know if I have a great answer to the question of, are we stuck or are we, looking at new? I think there's a whole mixture of that. But I think, again, it's looking at it saying, put a flag in the ground and say, what experience am I creating today? Right. And does that meet where everybody is? Right.
Yeah.
Take a moment to get a survey, do an NPS, do something that gives you some evidence of this human behavior. Because how else are you going to get it, right? Evaluate that. I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, we're getting to a point where we've got to end this conversation. I think we could talk and talk and talk because the experiences you've had, and there's so many nuggets of gold that you've seen, great programs you've founded or helped build, and even this conversation, there's tons of nuggets of gold. But we want to close this off with those nuggets of gold. And
Yeah.
so, if I'm a program buyer, a program leader, program manager, and I'm looking at, you know, the systems and my tech stack, and there's probably two sides of it. One that's Gen Run, and then there's that they're looking to build a tech stack, and then for 80% of the large companies, 90%, they've already adopted the tech stack. Let's go with the big company tech stack that's got a legacy tech stack. What are some of the key insights or takeaways that we want to exude on them? And then let's talk about, the Gen 1. I'm just going to build my tech stack. How should I do this? Should I go with
Mhm.
a big legacy provider that then I'm going to have some add-ons? Or should I go with the silver bullet type that has,
Yeah,
end to end, has the built-in EOR, has the built-in direct sourcing, etc. Like, let's
yeah,
talk about both because I don't want to meld them into one conversation because they're two very different
sure.
scenarios.
Well, I think first it's looking at that, and there's a couple things for us to consider. I'll go back to adoption, right? Adoption is the key KPI. Whatever you're doing and whatever tech stack you're staring down, look at adoption, right? Take the time to figure out what does my adoption rate look like? If you're hanging around 40 or 50%, and with some of these legacy systems and all that, you're at risk, right? You're at a ton of risk, and you can start to evaluate that. Go ask your risk people; they'll tell you all day long what kind of risk you're in. But you're at risk if that program it's not operationalized, right? And you need to improve your adoption, right? If you look at your targets there, your adoption should hang out somewhere between 65 and 80%,
Yeah.
right? And those are not small targets to hit. But if you focus on that as the measurement, all the other stuff will stack in behind all that,
Yeah.
right? Experientially, please spend the time, figure out what your talent are looking for in an experience and produce it, right? Again, if you can put a flag in the ground in your legacy system and you can bolt on some things to make that experience come to life, awesome, right?
Yeah.
If you can't, be bold, do a proof of concept product in a skill set, a geography, or whatever, right? And say, I did it over here. Now, can I reproduce that and slowly move past some of that legacy consideration, right? Right. And I always say this too. It's like whatever tech you have, leave room for the human.
Yeah.
Human in the loop is a big deal, right?
Yes.
Those systems today, if you're looking at a new system today and it cites that it can go end to end without a human being touching it, walk. There is a human being in there, right?
Yes.
And if they're not letting that be evident to you, then pick away at that because what is the human doing? The human is creating a human experience. They're informing it, they're helping it, they're driving it. It's a net, right? That if you do have a poor experience, you have to address it, right? It's like if you do an NPS score and it ends up in a negative way, you don't just sit there and say, oh, well, that's a bummer. You have to address it,
You have
right?
to act. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are the things that we look at. And again, I'm being a bit general about that, but it does speak to because there's some really good legacy tech that's out there today that just needs some polish.
Yeah.
And there are some beautiful integrations that make sense. Onboarding, getting compliant, simple onboarding that can be done in moments, not days. That's a huge,
Yeah.
huge upgrade.
Yeah.
A lot of people have already addressed it, but there's some beautiful products out there today. Look into that. Again, get evidence of success. The front end of these things, sourcing, engagement, and all that. There are some tools that are out there that make some wild statements about what they can do. Beware, right? And again, if they don't have a human thread in them, what are you doing right there, right? If you are sourcing and vetting talent without a human playing a part in that, you gotta address that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
Paul, I can't thank you enough for taking time in your day to be on the show and chat and talk about, you know, it almost it turned into a behavioral conversation, even though we were
yeah,
talking about technology, because we are in the people business. And I think you've made some great points that we're in the people business. So the technology needs to create that people and that user experience seamlessly, and that technology without people in the loop probably won't be successful, because when things go sideways a little bit in the technology, or somebody isn't comfortable with using it, you need that human to kind of build the trust to push you through those
Yep,
steps, especially for infrequent users, right? So,
exactly. And
um,
trust creates adoption. I'm not,
amazing. So
yeah,
thank you
yeah,
so much for your time. And I know, as always, we'll be in touch and keep talking about this awesome topic.
love it. Jeff, thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk soon.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.